My folks had Stanford in mind for me, not itinerant troubadour. My folks could clearly see that I was really following my bliss.
The story of the legendary rock band Grateful Dead begins long before stadium tours, massive fan communities, and decades of cultural influence. It starts in the early 1960s in California, a time when music was changing quickly and young musicians were experimenting with new sounds and ideas. Among those young musicians were Bob Weir and Bill Kreutzmann, two artists whose friendship and musical chemistry would help shape one of the most unique bands in rock history. Both of them were still teenagers when their paths began to cross with other musicians who shared the same passion for exploring music beyond traditional boundaries. During those early years, music was not just about fame or money. It was about creativity, freedom, and the excitement of discovering something completely new. California's growing counterculture scene gave these young musicians the perfect environment to experiment with sound. Coffee shops, small clubs, and college gatherings became places where artists could play freely and connect with audiences who were hungry for something different from mainstream pop music. Around this time, another young musician named Jerry Garcia was also developing his musical style. Garcia was deeply interested in folk, bluegrass, blues, and early rock music. When he began playing with other musicians in the Bay Area, he quickly became known for his creative guitar playing and his ability to blend different musical influences into something fresh and exciting. It did not take long before Garcia crossed paths with Bob Weir. Their meeting would eventually become one of the most important partnerships in rock history. At the time, Bob Weir was a teenager searching for direction in life. He had struggled in school and often felt like he did not quite fit into traditional systems. Music gave him a sense of purpose and identity. When he met Jerry Garcia, he found not only a mentor, but also someone who encouraged him to develop his own unique style of rhythm guitar playing. Garcia saw potential in the young musician and invited him to join informal jam sessions that were happening around Palo Alto and the San Francisco Bay Area. These sessions were not organized rehearsals, but rather gatherings where musicians could explore melodies, experiment with improvisation, and push the limits of what rock music could sound like. Soon another important figure joined the circle, Bill Kreutzmann. Unlike many drummers at the time who focused mainly on keeping a steady beat, Kreutzmann was interested in making the drums a creative voice within the music. He liked to experiment with rhythms and dynamics, giving songs a sense of movement and energy that made live performances exciting and unpredictable. When Kreutzmann began playing with Garcia and Weir, something special started to develop. Their musical styles were different, but they complemented each other in ways that created a powerful sound. As more musicians joined the group, including bassist Phil Lesh, the band slowly began to take shape. At first, they performed under the name The Warlocks, playing small shows in local venues and building a reputation for their long improvisational jams. These performances were unlike anything most audiences had experienced before. Songs could stretch far beyond their normal length as the musicians explored new melodies and rhythms in real time. The audience was not simply listening to a performance, they were witnessing music being created in the moment. Eventually, the band changed its name to the Grateful Dead, a title that would become famous across the world. Their early shows in San Francisco's underground music scene helped them build a loyal following of fans who were drawn to the band's free-spirited attitude and unpredictable live performances. At the heart of that sound was the growing partnership between Bob Weir and Bill Kreutzmann. While Jerry Garcia often received much of the attention as the band's lead guitarist and main singer, the musical foundation created by Weir's rhythm guitar and Kreutzmann's drums was just as important. Together, they helped shape the loose, flowing style that became the signature of the Grateful Dead. Their collaboration was not always simple or easy. Both musicians had strong ideas about how music should feel and move, and sometimes those ideas led to creative tension. But in many ways, that tension became part of what made the band so unique. Instead of trying to force their music into strict patterns, they allowed space for different personalities and styles to exist together within the same performance. This approach would eventually define the identity of the Grateful Dead and influence generations of musicians who came after them. As the 1960s progressed, the band's reputation continued to grow, and their experimental style began attracting larger crowds. What started as a small group of friends playing music for fun was slowly becoming something much bigger. Yet even as fame approached, the early bond between Bob Weir, Bill Kreutzmann, and their fellow band members remained at the center of everything they created. Their journey had only just begun, but the foundation they built during those early years would shape the future of rock music in ways few people could have imagined. As the 1960s continued, the group now known as the Grateful Dead began transforming from a small local act into one of the most fascinating musical movements in America. Their rise was not like that of many other rock bands of the era. While most groups focused on producing short radio-friendly songs, the Grateful Dead built their identity around long, improvised performances that could change every night. This approach attracted a loyal and growing fan base who were not just listeners but participants in the experience. People would travel from city to city to attend the band's concerts, knowing that each show would be different from the last. At the center of this evolving musical world were several key members whose personalities and talents blended in unusual ways. Jerry Garcia served as the creative heart of the band, bringing emotional depth and imaginative guitar playing that helped guide the group through extended musical journeys. Alongside him stood Bob Weir, whose rhythm guitar style was unlike anything heard in rock music at the time. Instead of simply strumming chords, Weir often played complex patterns between the beats, filling empty spaces with subtle musical colors that added depth to the sound. Supporting this musical structure was the powerful drumming of Bill Kreutzmann, who brought both strength and flexibility to the rhythm section. Kreutzmann's drumming was not limited to keeping time. He approached each performance as a living conversation with the other musicians. Over time, another drummer, Mickey Hart, joined the group, creating the unusual and powerful combination of two drummers playing together in a rock band. This dual drummer setup became one of the defining characteristics of the Grateful Dead's live performances. With two drummers interacting, the rhythm could become layered and complex, allowing the music to move in unexpected directions. The rest of the band also contributed to this creative environment. Phil Lesh approached the bass guitar differently from most rock musicians. Instead of simply supporting the harmony, Lesh often played melodic lines that moved freely through the music, almost like a second lead instrument. This unusual approach gave the band a sound that felt constantly shifting and evolving. Together, these musicians created performances that were less about playing songs exactly as recorded and more about exploring what those songs could become in the moment. During this period, the Grateful Dead became closely connected with the growing counterculture movement of the late 1960s. San Francisco had become a center for artistic experimentation, social change, and new ideas about community and freedom. The band performed at famous venues such as the Fillmore and the Avalon Ballroom, places where music, art, and cultural expression blended together. Their concerts often felt like gatherings of a larger community rather than simple entertainment events. Fans danced, shared ideas, and formed friendships that lasted for decades. The Grateful Dead's music reflected the spirit of that time. Songs combined elements of rock, folk, blues, country, and jazz, creating a sound that did not fit neatly into any single genre. This freedom allowed the band to continue evolving year after year without being limited by expectations. One night a performance might feel like a blues concert, while another night it could transform into an extended psychedelic jam that lasted for half an hour or more. This unpredictability became one of the band's greatest strengths. However, the same creative freedom that made their music exciting also required deep trust between the musicians. For improvisation to work, every member had to listen carefully and respond to what the others were doing in real time. In this sense, the connection between Bob Weir and Bill Kreutzmann played a crucial role. Weir's guitar often moved in complex rhythmic patterns, while Kreutzmann's drumming provided both structure and flexibility, allowing the music to expand and contract naturally. Their interaction created a rhythmic conversation that helped guide the entire band during long improvisational sections. Over time, this chemistry became one of the reasons the Grateful Dead developed such a powerful reputation as a live band. Even people who had never heard their recordings would attend a concert and immediately sense that something special was happening on stage. Each musician seemed to be listening and responding in a way that made the performance feel alive. Fans began recording shows and trading tapes, spreading the band's music far beyond the cities where they performed. This grassroots sharing of recordings helped grow the Deadhead community, a network of dedicated followers who supported the band for decades. As the 1970s approached, the Grateful Dead were no longer just a local San Francisco group. They were becoming a national phenomenon. Their tours expanded, their audience grew larger, and their influence on the music world continued to increase. Yet, even as success arrived, the band remained committed to the idea that music should remain open, creative, and unpredictable. That philosophy would guide them through many changes in the years to come. It would also test the relationships between the band members, especially as fame, pressure, and personal differences began to shape the next chapters of their long and unusual journey. As the Grateful Dead moved into the 1970s, their reputation as one of the most unique live bands in the world continued to grow. Concert halls and festivals across the United States began inviting them to perform, and their audience expanded far beyond the early San Francisco scene that had first embraced them. Fans who attended a Grateful Dead show often described the experience as something very different from a normal rock concert. Instead of simply playing a set list of songs, the band treated each performance as a living experiment where music could evolve in unexpected directions. Songs might start in a familiar way, but slowly transform into long improvisational passages that carried both the musicians and the audience into completely new musical spaces. At the center of this evolving sound were several powerful personalities whose musical ideas did not always match perfectly, but somehow created magic when they played together. The interaction between Bob Weir and Bill Kreutzmann remained one of the most important elements of the band's sound. Weir continued developing his unusual rhythm guitar technique, playing complex chords and patterns that often moved between the beats rather than directly on them. This style gave the music a loose and open feeling, allowing other instruments to fill the space in creative ways. Kreutzmann, on the other hand, focused on creating a steady yet flexible rhythmic foundation that could support long improvisations without losing momentum. When Mickey Hart joined him on drums, the band's rhythm section became even more powerful. The two drummers worked together to create layered rhythms that felt almost orchestral in their complexity. At times they played in perfect unison, while at other moments they split into different rhythmic patterns that pushed the music forward like two engines working together. This dual-drummer approach was rare in rock music, and it helped give the Grateful Dead a sound that was both powerful and unpredictable. However, as the band grew more successful, creative differences naturally began to appear. Each member had strong opinions about how the music should develop. Jerry Garcia often acted as a kind of musical guide for the group. His calm personality and deep love for musical exploration helped keep the band focused on creativity rather than conflict. When disagreements happened, Garcia usually tried to bring the musicians back to the idea that the music itself was the most important thing. His guitar playing also served as a bridge between different musical ideas, connecting the rhythm section with the melodies in a way that made the entire performance feel unified. Still, tension sometimes appeared beneath the surface. Bob Weir was known for being extremely detail-oriented. He cared deeply about arrangements, song structures, and the technical quality of the band's sound. Kreutzmann, by contrast, often preferred a more spontaneous approach. As a drummer influenced by jazz and rhythm and blues traditions, he liked the music to feel alive and energetic rather than carefully controlled. These differences did not mean the musicians disliked each other. In many ways, the tension between structure and freedom actually helped shape the band's creative identity. The Grateful Dead thrived on the balance between careful musicianship and wild improvisation. When the balance worked well, the result was a performance that felt both disciplined and completely free at the same time. Another important factor in the band's growth was the role of bassist Phil Lesh. Lesh had a background in classical music and experimental composition, which influenced the way he approached the bass guitar. Instead of simply following the chords of the song, he often created melodic lines that moved independently through the music. This gave the band a sense of movement and unpredictability that few other rock groups could match. In a typical rock band, the rhythm section might focus mainly on supporting the singer or lead guitarist. In the Grateful Dead, Every instrument had the freedom to lead the music at different moments. A bass line might suddenly become the center of attention, or the drummers might guide the band into a new rhythmic direction during a jam. This shared musical leadership created a dynamic environment where each performance felt like a conversation between friends who were constantly discovering new ideas together. As the 1970s continued, the band released several studio albums that helped introduce their music to a wider audience. However, many fans believed that the Grateful Dead's true power could only be experienced live. Their concerts became famous for their length, energy, and emotional intensity. Some shows lasted several hours, with songs flowing seamlessly from one into another. Fans would often travel long distances to attend multiple concerts, forming a community that became known as the Deadheads. These fans were not simply spectators. They were part of a cultural movement built around the values of freedom, creativity, and shared experience. Yet with growing popularity also came greater pressure. Touring schedules became more demanding, and the business side of the music industry began playing a larger role in the band's decisions. Managing a successful rock band required dealing with record labels, promoters, finances, and logistical challenges that had not existed during the group's early days in small clubs. For musicians who had started out simply wanting to explore music together, this new reality sometimes created stress and frustration. Even so, the Grateful Dead managed to continue evolving as artists. Their ability to adapt while staying true to their creative spirit allowed them to remain influential for decades. The relationships between the band members also continued to change as they grew older and faced the challenges of fame, personal struggles, and life on the road. Through it all, the connection between Bob Weir and Bill Kreutzmann remained an essential part of the band's rhythm and identity. Their musical dialogue, sometimes smooth and sometimes tense, helped drive the Grateful Dead forward during one of the most important periods in their long and unusual journey through the world of rock music. By the late 1970s and early 1980s, the Grateful Dead had already become one of the most respected and unusual groups in rock history. What made them special was not just their music, but the culture that surrounded them. Fans traveled across the country to attend concerts, sharing recordings of shows and building a community that felt more like a family than a traditional fan base. These dedicated followers became known as Deadheads, and they played a major role in helping the band grow over the years. At a time when many artists focused heavily on selling records, the Grateful Dead built their reputation mainly through live performances. Each concert offered a new experience, and fans loved the idea that no two shows would ever sound exactly the same. At the center of this constantly evolving sound were musicians who continued to challenge each other creatively. Bob Weir had now fully developed his distinctive rhythm guitar style, one that many music experts considered one of the most complex approaches in rock music. Instead of playing simple chords, Weir often created intricate patterns that filled the space between the band's main melodies. His playing added color and movement to the music, almost like a second percussion instrument. Supporting this foundation was the powerful drumming of Bill Kreutzmann along with fellow drummer Mickey Hart. Together they created a rhythmic engine that allowed the band to explore long improvisational sections without losing energy or direction. The two drummers often worked like partners in a conversation, responding to each other's ideas and guiding the music forward with shifting rhythms and dynamic changes. Meanwhile, bassist Phil Lesh continued pushing the boundaries of what the bass guitar could do in a rock band. Instead of staying quietly in the background, Lesh often played melodic lines that moved freely around the other instruments, adding another layer of complexity to the band's sound. At the center of it all remained Jerry Garcia, whose guitar and voice carried the emotional heart of the music. Garcia had a natural ability to guide the band during long improvisations, helping everyone return to familiar melodies after exploring new musical territory. However, while the music continued to evolve, life inside the band was not always easy. The pressures of constant touring, the challenges of managing a large organization, and the personal struggles of individual members began affecting the group in different ways. Jerry Garcia, in particular, faced serious difficulties during this time. Like many musicians of his generation, he struggled with addiction, and his health sometimes suffered as a result. These challenges worried his bandmates and fans alike, because Garcia's presence had always been central to the Grateful Dead's identity. Despite these problems, the band continued performing and creating music. Their concerts remained powerful events that brought thousands of fans together. During the 1980s, the Grateful Dead also experienced one of their biggest commercial successes with the release of the song Touch of Grey, which became a major radio hit and introduced the band to a younger generation of listeners. For many artists, such sudden popularity might have changed their style or approach, but the Grateful Dead remained committed to their unique musical philosophy. They still focused on live performances, improvisation, and the connection between musicians and audience. At the same time, the relationships within the band continued evolving. Creative disagreements sometimes appeared, especially when it came to decisions about tempo, arrangements, and the direction of the music. For example, Bob Weir often preferred exploring slower, more spacious musical interpretations, giving songs room to breathe and develop gradually. Bill Kreutzmann, influenced by jazz and rhythm and blues traditions, sometimes favored faster tempos that brought energy and excitement to the stage. These differences occasionally created tension, but they also added to the band's unique sound. The push and pull between different musical ideas helped keep the performances fresh and unpredictable. Another important aspect of the Grateful Dead story during this period was the growing complexity of their touring operation. By the 1980s, the band had become a large organization involving crew members, sound engineers, lighting technicians, and many other professionals who worked together to support each concert. The band also invested heavily in advanced sound systems, striving to deliver the best possible audio experience for audiences. Their dedication to high-quality live sound became legendary within the music industry. As the years passed, the members of the band grew older and began reflecting on the journey they had taken together. What started as a group of young musicians experimenting with music in small California clubs had grown into a global cultural phenomenon. Yet despite the fame and success, the spirit that first brought them together still remained. They continued chasing the feeling that music could create when musicians trusted each other enough to explore unknown territory. For Bob Weir and Bill Kreutzmann in particular, this period represented both a continuation of their long musical partnership and a time of personal growth. After spending years playing together on stage, they had developed an almost instinctive understanding of each other's rhythms and ideas. Even when disagreements happened, their shared history allowed them to find common ground through the music itself. As the band moved toward the final decade of the 20th century, the Grateful Dead stood as one of the longest-running and most influential groups in rock history. Yet the next chapter of their story would bring new challenges that would test both their friendships and their ability to continue making music together in a changing world. The long and unusual journey of the Grateful Dead faced one of its most difficult turning points in 1995 with the passing of Jerry Garcia. For more than 3 decades, Garcia had been the emotional and creative center of the band. His guitar playing, songwriting, and quiet leadership helped guide the group through countless tours, musical experiments, and personal struggles. When he died in August 1995, it felt to many fans as if an entire era of music had come to an end. The news shocked the global community of Deadheads who had followed the band for years. Many of them believed that without Garcia, the Grateful Dead could never truly be the same again. For the remaining members of the band, the loss was not just professional, but deeply personal. They had spent most of their adult lives traveling and performing together, and the bond between them was built through decades of shared experiences on and off the stage. For musicians like Bob Weir and Bill Kreutzmann, the moment was especially painful because Garcia had often acted as a calming presence within the group. When creative disagreements appeared or tensions rose during long tours, Garcia's personality usually helped restore balance. Without him, the band members suddenly faced the difficult question of what their future should look like. After Garcia's death, the Grateful Dead officially decided to stop performing under that name. Many fans understood the decision, recognizing that the band's identity had always been closely connected to Garcia's presence. However, the musicians themselves still had a strong desire to continue making music. Over the next several years,